what is inflammation? Inflammation is what's responsible for causing the majority of pain people experience. Now, there are two complexes that work together in the body as a type of check and balance for inflammatory responses. Something called NF-kappa B and another called NRF2, referred to as NRF2. First, meet the hulk of inflammation, NF-kappa B. Every time it shows up, something gets damaged. The thing is, NF-kappa B can actually be an asset on the right team if regulated. It plays a key role in regulating the immune response to infection. However, incorrect regulation of NF-kappa B can result in the hulk getting a little overzealous and a hulk smash of the system. This causes a lot of havoc in the body, usually resulting in pain and inflammation. Now meet NRF2, the regulator. This guy keeps Hulk in check. You might say he puts Hulk back in the cage. NRF2 regulates the expression of antioxidant proteins that protect against oxidative damage triggered by injury and inflammation. And it activates an army of over 500 genes designed to protect the cells. NRF2 is really important in the body because when left unchallenged in the system, the Hulk, NF-kappa B, can cause extensive damage to the cells and the tissues. Who would want the Hulk of inflammation smashing their cells and wrecking their body like that? But when NRF2 is at its full strength, it can put the Hulk back in the cage, and the body starts to repair the damage. No more NF-kappa B running rampant, causing widespread destruction. Obviously then, the goal is to strengthen NRF2 levels and lower levels of NF-kappa B in your body. So how do you do this? Keep watching as I teach you how to keep inflammation in check and how to put the Hulk of inflammation back in his cage. It's simple. Stop the Hulk of inflammation and stop the pain. So let's talk a little bit about inflammation. So what is inflammation? You ever thought about that? Let's put it this way. Inflammation is the first sign of healing. So anytime something's damaged, anytime something's irritated, anytime something's had some kind of traumatic event, the first thing that happens is your body starts to inflame. Anybody here ever sprained an ankle? What's the first thing that happens? That ankle starts to blow up. If you injure it, anybody here ever had an infected sinus? What happens? Boom, as soon as that trauma from that bacteria or that fungus or whatever's attacking those membranes starts, inflammation is the first thing that happens. So initially, inflammation is our friend. It's a good thing because it's trying to initiate healing. When we run into problems is when we're not fixing the cause and that inflammation stays there for periods of time. Then tissues get irritated and they get aggravated, kind of like a sunburn, if you will. And so when things get irritated, you can imagine they're more sensitive than they normally would be. So anybody here ever suffer from having inflammation in your body? It looks like this. You wake up in the morning and instead of just hopping out of the bed like you're happy, you usually get up and you start working yourself up from the bottom up. You kind of like the Tin Man on the Wizard of Oz. Well, me. And you're heading down the hall and you're trying to get it all together and you're thinking, oh man, I'm getting old. No, you're just inflamed. And if you don't find the cause of that inflammation, you're gonna keep doing that every day of your life. Can you imagine waking up every morning and that's what you have to look forward to? My feet are gonna hurt when I put them on the floor. I'm gonna hear my knees talking to me all the way down the hallway. I mean, does life really have to be like that? I don't think it does. I think we can live better. As a matter of fact, I'm going to prove that we can do something about it. So the first thing to understand, if you're having inflammation, it's simple. Something's wrong. You're not going to have pain for no reason. You're not going to have inflammation for no reason. If something's hurting, something is wrong. Has everybody got that concept? So when you get these receptors injured, and then they inflame and they get irritated, how many people have noticed that it kind of gets red a little bit even? You can see it get red and inflamed, okay? So picture, how many people have ever been sunburned? Wow. You can rub your thigh right now as hard as you want, it doesn't really hurt. You can scratch on it. Go put it about 8 hours out in the sun. Let that leg get nice and hot pink. Then take those nails and try to do the same procedure. you're going to find out you're going to have what? Pain. It's going to hurt. It's amazing now, because even now, the least little things, even your pants rubbing, that little bit, it didn't irritate you before, but now the least little things start to irritate you. So when you're inflamed, little things seem great big. And so what you want to do, you don't want to leave things inflamed, or there's no way you can come out of your world. You still have to do life. You still want to be able to do the things you're doing. But if you're walking around inflamed all the time, you're always going to be in pain. So we're going to have to look at this thing called inflammation and see where it comes from. What happens? Why do we even have it? And so it starts with receptors. Now I'm going to teach you something about inflammation. A lot of inflammation starts in the gut. You think, how would that happen? Well, because when the foods we eat and the chemicals that are on those foods and the way those foods are processed, they irritate the digestion. And once that lining, that epithelial lining in that gut gets irritated, guess what? Like a sunburn, it inflames. Now, when that starts to inflame, literally the tissues get injured, and it sets up a whole condition that I won't talk about in this talk, but it's called leaky gut. Has anyone heard of leaky gut syndrome? So what happens is things that are supposed to be in the body start getting out into the bloodstream. And when they get out into the bloodstream, they start creeping around. They go down into your joints, and they start, watch this, they trigger something called inflammatory cytokines, histamines, leukotrienes, other inflammatory cytokines. And these guys are little protein messengers that say, hey, bring the inflammation. So when that stuff's leaking out, every time you eat, man, that stuff's leaking out in your system and you're blowing up. How many people after you eat, sometimes you feel, oh, now you weren't hurting at all. You didn't have a headache. You didn't have any problems. Didn't have any sinus issues. All of a sudden you eat food and boom, you start getting all these symptoms. See, all you really need to do is learn how to heal your gut. I go through it extensively in the book, walk you step by step on how to deflame, to take the inflammation out of your gut. Think that might be beneficial? Now, the problem is when you have leaky gut, the same type of membranes are around your brain, and you get what's called leaky brain. So now those same inflammatory cytokines leak into your brain, and you start having brain fog. Have you known anybody lately to have depression? Or they walk around, they're oppressed. It changes the moods. The neurotransmitters are in the gut. I don't know if you know that, the neurotransmitters are made in the gut, even though they're used in the brain. So if your gut's inflamed, what do you suppose the neurochemistry looks like? Yeah, you got a big problem. So you can see inflammation's not a good thing. It's not a good thing anywhere. Quickly, I just want to tell you that when those inflammatory cytokines are leaking around your system, you have this thing called NF-kappa B. It's a genetic protein that sits on top of a cell, and when those cytokines hit it, it's like the Hulk of inflammation. And then when Hulk is expressed, Hulk begins to smash and crush and creates more inflammation. So there's this other guy called Nerf2, and what he does is he's the guy who comes in and he puts Hulk back in his cage. And so you want to increase Nerf2 levels in your body. I walk through in the book and I show you the compounds and the food you need to eat that begin to bring Nerf2 levels up that put Hulk back in his cage. Wouldn't you like to have Hulk to stop smashing around in your body? If you do nothing or you just continue ignoring the problem, guess what? It's only going to get worse. In there I put 6 recovery protocols that teach you how to get inflammation out of every part of your body. Can you imagine if you got all of the inflammation out of your body, put Hulk of inflammation back in his cage? I can tell you, not only are you going to feel better, not only are you going to think clear, move better, not only are you going to have a better quality of life, but we're going to teach you how to stop the pain.
So how much have you heard in the media lately about dementia, Alzheimer's? Did you know that these degenerative brain conditions are some of the fastest diseases on the rise? They're caused from actually chronic brain inflammation that can lead to headaches, depression, and eventually to chronic degeneration. So it's important to be able to spot the warning signs of these degenerative brain conditions early on so you can do something about it. Imagine the surface of your brain as a landscape of hills and valleys. This is the way your brain should look. But when the degenerative brain diseases like dementia and Alzheimer's begin in the brain, due to long-term inflammation, the landscape begins to change like a fire that takes down a forest. Research clearly shows that these diseases are like a slow burn, a 20 to 30 to even a 40-year disease. It usually starts around the age of 30 or 40 and slowly gets worse, doing more and more damage to the brain over time.
That's why it's so important to detect it early on. You don't want to allow it to spread and do extensive damage just because no one was watching. The first smoke signal is often unexplained depression. Depression is primarily caused by chronic inflammation in the brain. If the inflammation in the brain is not addressed, it can begin to cause long-term damage to the brain. When those hills start getting shorter and the valleys start getting wider, that means the disease is spreading and the brain is degenerating. The longer the brain's inflamed, the more those hills and valleys become affected. So obviously it's important to recognize the signs of brain inflammation. Get ahead of the fire. However, the highest probability of preventing and eliminating this disease is to start now, years ahead of the problem, so it never has a chance to develop. Keep watching as I discuss the latest research on how to prevent chronic brain inflammation to help you stop a real pain in the brain, Alzheimer's and dementia.
Alzheimer's and dementia is on the rise at an alarming rate. Have you heard those terms? Alzheimer's, dementia? When I say dementia, that is when the brain has been inflamed for a long period of time. And if you look at a brain, you'll see it has hills and valleys. When those hills get lower and those valleys get wider, that's a degenerative brain, and you have problems with cognitive ability. You can't retain memory. You can't function like you should. So those are dementias. Now, one form of dementia is Alzheimer's, okay? So Alzheimer is a dementia, but all dementias are not Alzheimer's. So the same process occurs, it's just Alzheimer's behaves a little different way. But watch this, when you address them in the system, you still need to address them the same way. And what is it from? Chronic degenerative inflammation in the brain. Now watch this, you don't just wake up with dementia. You don't just wake up with Alzheimer's. It's about a 20 to 30 years progression in disease. Actually, now they're seeing even upward of 40 years it takes. So what does that tell you? That means if you can do something now, you don't have to worry about having degenerative brain conditions when you get older. So it's nice, I don't know how you feel, but sometimes it's nice to have a choice. So there's some choices you can make and some things you can do. And if you can make these changes, then you don't have to worry about the brain degenerating at a rapid rate. And you don't have to worry about waking up and not knowing who your siblings are, or have an environment where you have to be assisted in your living. So let's talk a little bit about what causes it, what happens. We notice that every time there's an inflammatory cytokine, if you remember, inflammatory cytokines, anything that's released in your body when you have trauma somewhere in your body. Talked about, the gut can be irritated. You can have hidden infections hiding in your body. You can have toxicities in your body from chemicals, heavy metals, just things from our environment, and we never cleanse them out. If they stay in the body, they cause harm, they cause damage, they cause irritation, they cause aggravation. Most of all, they cause inflammatory cytokines that constantly send the body signs to make inflammation. Well, that inflammation then begins to accumulate in brain and begins to put pressure in there day after day, week after week, year after year. There's something called neurofibrillary tangles, and they start to form in the brain, if you just like ropes in the brain, and then they start clumping with something called beta amyloid plaques. Those two then begin to intertwine, and as those intertwine, you can see that they make nasty little knots in brain. Now, at first, they thought, wow, every time we see dementia patients, we see more of these plaques, so plaques must be the problem. So they started making medications to get rid of the plaques, and you know what they found out? When they treated the plaques, the patients got worse. Why? Well, let me put it to you this way. If you are driving down the road and you see a fire out in the woods, it's real common to see these little guys running around in red suits with fire trucks, right? Yeah. We call them firemen. So the bigger the fire, the more the firemen. So you can go out and stop all the firemen, but is your problem going to get better or get worse? It's going to get worse. Why? Because they were there to fix the problem. They weren't causing it. That's what they found out about these plaques. These plaques were there trying to fix the problem. They weren't the perpetrators. So when you have these plaques building up, that's showing you there is a fire raging in your brain. Now, leaky brain, leaky gut, leaky membranes come from chronic inflammation in the body. When these cytokines are constantly firing, they make your brain swell, they make you irritated, and they start degenerating your brain. So we talked earlier about neurotransmitters being made in your gut. So watch this, we have serotonin. How many people have heard of serotonin? Serotonin is pretty well responsible for your mood and your well-being. So it doesn't take a whole lot to get your serotonin levels off, and your mood's gonna change. How many times, watch this, have you eaten a food or something and maybe your gut's responded to it? That neurotransmitter's made in the gut, but because your gut's irritated by the food you just eat, all of a sudden, you go from Jekyll to Hyde in 5 minutes. You're laughing, you're having a good time. All of a sudden, your wife's something, you go, what? And you just scream this thing out of her. And I don't know about you, but sometimes you can catch yourself doing it. You go, what just happened there? You know, that is a mood changer. Do you think maybe things might be a little more peaceful around the house? Maybe the relationship might get a little better if we could fix some of those inflammatory problems that are causing our moods and balancing serotonin? How about dopamine? Dopamine's for your drive. When you get up, you just feel like doing something. You ever had the spirit of give up on you? You just want to quit and give up. You got dopamine problems. Something suppressing that is probably coming either from your gut or from the brain systemically somewhere. We've got to block the inflammatory cytokines. You can see it. Norepinephrine. It mobilizes the body for action. It's what says, okay, let's get ready. We're ready to go. We need to do this. We need to get things ready. How many people just would rather sit down than get ready for anything? Yeah, so we have another neurotransmitter. And finally, this is a huge one. Listen to me, GABA. Anybody have trouble sleeping at night? When you can't sleep at night, guess what? Something's wrong. Usually it's inflammation somewhere. In the book, don't worry, I walk you through. I show you how to balance all of the neurotransmitters, show you how to stop those inflammatory cytokines. So those things begin to balance. It even affects your hormones. Your hormones can come back into balance. Hallelujah, all of the husbands. Everything is good around the house. I'm teaching you how to make your life better. It's very simple. Balance the neurotransmitters and you can stop the pain.
Everyone's family tree has one thing in common: genetics. It's the combination of chromosomes from your parents and previous generations that make you, you. Your family genes determine everything, from the color of your eyes to how prone you are to heart disease. You may be familiar with the term genetics, but you may not be as familiar with something called epigenetics. Epigenetics add and remove small chemical tags or labels to DNA, like a master key that lets the body know whether the gene should be turned on or turned off. Stresses of every kind have a lot to do with what gets turned on. Environmental stresses, electromagnetic, chemical, physical. These are all keys. These all influence the genes. When the genes are under the wrong conditions, they may become stressed to the point where the master key changes the label of one of the bad expressions, such as a cancer gene, to on. That person's epigenetics will recognize that, then push the button and start producing cancer cells in the body. Depending on what is switched on or off determines what will and what will not be expressed. That explains why people can be perfectly healthy their entire life until they have a traumatic experience. The genes get stressed, they hit the wrong button, and now the dormant disease machine is working in production mode. The good news is that genes can be switched on, but they also can be switched off. We have some control over this occurrence. Just as bad gene expressions can be switched on by doing the wrong things, they can certainly be switched off from doing the right things. Remember, epigenetics can initiate or deactivate the genetic switches that express diseases and pain. Watch as I talk about some of the many ways we can keep the system in check. Keep the wrong buttons turned off and the right buttons turned on. Let's get the right buttons pushed so you can live stronger and stop the pain.
You know, when you talk about genetics, that's a really big topic, because when you're talking about genes or genetics, you're talking about basically chromosome pairs and patterns that make you, you. They define who you are, define what you become. But there's another term I want you to become familiar with, and it's called epigenetics. Say epigenetics. So epigenetics works, if you will, kind of like master keys. So everyone's had a master key that goes into their house and it operates all the locks. And you can turn locks on, you can turn locks off, you can open things, you can close things. So think of epigenetics as things that open up different aspects of your life, different expressions on whether things are healthy or whether things are not healthy. They're all controlled, watch this, by epigenetics, which means they're affected from outside sources. Now, the genes you get, that's what you get, and that's who you are. That's the color of your hair, that's the color of your eyes, and that's not changing. But epigenetics are what run the functions of your body from day to day. So if you're living a lifestyle that's conducive, that's healthy, that's lining up, guess what? Those epigenetics are going to express in a very good way, and all those keys every morning are going to go and unlock all of the good operations in your life. But if you start doing things, lifestyle problems, you bring habits in that are really kind of, they're not good for the body. Let's face it, one thing I've learned about people is they know what's good and they know what's not. You know what's good for you. Come on, let's just go there. You've been sitting at the table, and the lady comes and says, would you like any dessert? And the little angel pops up on your shoulder and says, you don't really need that. And then the little devil pops over and says, go ahead, get two, they're small. And you sit there and fight the battle, and of course, you know what usually happens. Well, I did work hard all week. I've been under quite a bit of stress. I deserve it. So you go ahead and punish yourself. You're giving yourself your reward. I'm going to go ahead and take something for me that's going to work against my epigenetics. So tomorrow morning, instead of the switches turning on and being healthy, you're going to turn off half of my box, and I'm going to be running on about 4 out of 8 cylinders. Wow. All because you deserve it. John 10:10 puts it a better way. Jesus said, I came to give life and to give it more abundantly. Well, that's your John 10:10 scale. Everybody hold your hand up. This is bonus today. All right, so every time you look at something and you want to eat it, steal, kill, and destroy, or life and life more abundantly, what's it going to be? Everything you eat. Let's do it again. Which one's it going to be? Steal, kill, and destroy, life and life more abundantly. The choice is up to you. Whether you watch something, whether you eat something, whether you're going to bring something into your life, please use the John 10:10 scale. Because watch this, these choices that you're making, they're literally running your body. They're affecting who you become. What does that mean? That means I don't care how you've lived up to now. You can make changes. You can go through this book. Let me walk you through all of the strategies on how to balance your body, balance your brain. And when you're through, listen to me. 1 year from now, you don't have to be the same person. I'm talking about from bottom to top. I mean, all the way down to the last cell. You can train that body through your epigenetics, turn on the good switches, turn off the bad switches. Now, there's something that you may need to be tested for, and I want to go ahead and throw this out there. You can do it online. They have blood tests. You can go see your physician. But there's something, it's a big old word. It's called methylene tetrahydrofolate reductase. Did you get that? Yeah. Let's just call it MTHFR. Okay? And MTHFR is a genetic expression so what happens is if you have this little mutant defect, you don't make good conversions. So simply, you have the master antioxidant in your body. Aren't you glad you have an antioxidant? If you didn't, you would rust out. You would degenerate. You would dry up. You would break down. So inside your body makes glutathione. Now, there's a conversion that needs to happen where you take an amino acid out of your diet and it converts to homocysteine, then it further goes to glutathione. But watch this, if you don't have the right nutrients, how about I even give you the nutrients? If you don't have the right amount of B12, the right amount of B6, if you don't have the right amount of folate in the right form, or you don't have N-acetylcysteine, you cannot make the conversions that you need. So first of all, people that have this disorder,
they now, watch this, you can't make the conversion. You can't convert the folate that needs to happen to make glutathione. If you don't have enough glutathione, watch this, how many people do you know that say, God, there just seems like there's always something wrong with that person? Or maybe it's you and you think, gosh, every time I wake up, I have something wrong. Something hurts. I got another problem. I just got rid of this problem. Now I have another problem. You're probably MTHFR positive. You probably have one of those. You're not making the conversion. So watch this now. Science, we've converted things where we can convert that molecule. You can simply take that by mouth. And when you take that by mouth, now the conversion is being done for you. Glutathione comes up. Guess what? Now you're like everybody else. You're back normal again. You don't have to walk around suffering with pain every day. You don't have to walk around with all these syndromes and these disorders. You can just be like everybody else and be normal. Wouldn't that be nice? Don't worry, I'll show you exactly how to do it in the book, even how to take the test. So epigenetics are affected by our choices. So let me walk you through in the book, and let me take you through and show you how to rebalance all of the epigenetics so we can get all the keys in your lock, turning all the good stuff on and all the bad stuff off. Restore the epigenetics. It's simple. It stops the pain.